Hey, welcome back to the show. Surf Splendor, episode number 553. We Shouldn't Be Friends. Perfect title for the new podcast, co hosted by Nick Carroll and Hannah Anderson. Nick Carroll's name you probably know. He's best known as a surf journalist, and he started his career in the late 70s writing articles for various surf magazines. This was all before taking an associate editor's position at Trax in 1981. He was also the Australian national titles champ in the men's division in 1979 and 1981, something that I personally feel has been just overshadowed by his prolific career as a journalist. He moved to the US to work as the editor of Surfing magazine in the mid 90s. That's where I first started seeing his name. He's authored a number of books, including the biography entitled TC, Tom Carroll, about his younger brother. He is regarded by many as kind of the most popular and certainly the most knowledgeable surf writer and journalist. Hannah Anderson is an Australian photographer and videographer who has a bachelor's degree in journalism. And similarly to Nick, she actually got her start at Trax magazine as well. She then moved on to Surfing World, and she spent the better part of the past 3 years traveling the world for Surfline, documenting the Olympics, the Eddy in Hawaii. She was at Nazare a number of times. So we'll get into that recent Surfline fallout in this conversation shortly. But Hannah and Nick recently launched a podcast called We Shouldn't Be Friends. And the synopsis says that, quote, Nick is a bald-headed boomer in recovery from surf rage, while Hannah is a blonde millennial with a surfboard addiction, end quote. Which I feel kind of belies the fact that the podcast is drenched in surf history, trivia, and just real-time updates from what's going on in the surfing world. So check that out. You can subscribe to it on Spotify or Apple. And then quickly, before we get into Nick and Hannah, I, of course, need to acknowledge our partners, without whom Surf Splendor would not be possible. So check out the Surfrider Foundation, Real Water Sports, and Vayer Watches. Surfrider Foundation needs your support. Become a member at surfrider.org. Also, I recently launched a podcast with them. I host it, I produce it. Episode 1 is about the most polluted beach in America. Go find that on their YouTube channel or on any podcast platform. Just search the Surfrider Podcast. And then VayerWatches.com/Surf Splendor. Look at this beautiful timepiece. I'll save you 15% by going through that promo code. These are ocean-ready, waterproof, guaranteed, durable, stylish, great value. VayerWatches.com/Surf Splendor. And then Real Water Sports is our retail partner who has everything that you need for any water sport. 1,500 surfboards in inventory. And those boards are shaped by a who's who of our past guests here on Surf Splendor. A lot of just our favorites. So they have everything you need: beach towels, helmets, wetsuits, board bags, realwatersports.com. Okay, without further ado, my name is David Scales for Surf Splendor, and I really hope that you enjoy my conversation with Nick Carroll and Hannah Anderson from We Shouldn't Be Friends podcast. Enjoy.
Surf Splendor.
Nick,
Hey.
I want to start off with a story because I've told this to other people, but you were the only person who was actually physically there to witness it.
Okay.
The only time I met Kelly Slater, you introduced us. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but I feel it was a meaningful moment for me for two reasons.
Yeah.
He acknowledged my existence, but then just as quickly snubbed me.
Yes.
Oh, so do you remember it?
Yeah, fuck yeah. But I'm also like, this is part of the flow with Kelly. He's such a fucking, I don't know, sixth dan master of fame, right? And so one of the mechanisms, like one of the fame skills that are largely unappreciated, is the ability to like compartmentalize all the time, constantly. Like, don't get overwhelmed. Like, be willing to switch off from something and move on to something else. And Kelly's masterful at that. Like, it's a life skill. And but I'm sure it's always funny meeting him.
I want to know how you guys met. I've listened to your podcast and I hear you. I don't think I've ever heard you directly tell the story.
Well, David, We actually share something in common as well. Nick introduced me to Kelly Slater. He didn't snub me, but he did mercilessly tease you.
Oh my God.
And pretend not to know him. We were in a press conference at VALS and pretended not to know him, and then just ragged on you in front of like Channel 9, Channel 7, Channel 10. It was fucking hilarious.
And then he was like, I introduced him to Hannah, and he says to me, so she's here to make you look good.
Wait, idiot.
Yeah, dogs.
Yeah.
But Nick and I met, like through Zoom, much like this, much like how you and I have met right now. But I was applying for a job at Surfline, and Nick was the first person that kind of popped up on the screen in that process. And I honestly didn't know anything about him, which was so. I was just like Googling in the meeting. Like I knew you were Tom Carroll's brother, and I knew you'd written a book, but like that was kind of like my scope of knowledge about you. And then just oh shit, I better look up this guy in the job interview.
That is hilarious.
And I was kind of looking at it because like I was hoping to hire someone to help execute the Surfline Australia scheme, right? And I was going, wow, who's it going to be? Like, I didn't really want to hire any of the usual suspects because I thought it's not right. Like, it's a different world, right? And Hannah popped up, and I looked at her, and I thought, okay, she's the one, but like, we better just test this a bit, you know? And it was during COVID, during the pandemic, and we couldn't communicate face to face. We didn't actually meet face to face for I don't know how long, maybe
Almost a year.
almost a year, yeah.
Wow.
And I vividly remember us meeting face to face. Hannah said, right now I can go surfing. Like, I'll come over and I'll surf your spot. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be sick, right? And so she beat me to it, as she often does, right? So she was already out there, and I paddled out, and the spot we were surfing, there's this little secret keyhole thing that you paddle around from the back, so you enter the zone from a different angle. It's not just paddling off the beach. And so I'm paddling over, and I'm scanning the lineup while I'm paddling over, and I just saw this little blonde head and this huge grin, and I just went, there she is. Here we go.
It's funny, hey, like that surf, I was surfing like a tiny surfboard, and I was like zipping around on the inside, and Nick was doing his typical old man thing, like waiting out the back for a wave that's never gonna come. But like I think for me, the thing that I remember most about us meeting was actually, for some reason, I don't think we hung out much after that.
No.
I went up to Noosa, and like was cruising around Noosa, working from up there for a bit. And you came up for the Noosa Festival of Surfing. And I think because that year we'd just been communicating via text message or like via Slack and online communication services, it was almost like this weird courting process. It was like, oh, well, I know he likes this. I'm going to make this joke, and like back and forth.
Yeah.
And then we met and went out to dinner at the Noosa Festival of Surfing. And I was like, oh, this feels like a weird date. Stop it.
It's a lot of pressure to put on a meeting.
It was.
Well, Nick, I was going to ask you, you said you didn't want to hire any of the, I don't know, the old guard, essentially. Say more about that.
Okay, well, this is just my opinion, right? But it's kind of backed by evidence, I think. You know, the way the surfing communities of the world were in like 1970s and 1980s and 1990s was very different to how it is now, right? The assortment of people who surf today is entirely different to that time. The people who were ruling lineups back in the 80s and 90s, mostly young men, 18 to 25 years of age, you know, pretty fired up, like little packs of them everywhere, just hunting and, you know, killing. They're all like 50 plus years old now, and like they're still okay surfers, but they've changed their place in the lineup. And um, in the last 20 years, and particularly in the last 5 to 6 years, there's just been a flood of people coming to the lineup who were never really allowed to surf before, and who've embraced it with this, like, to me, very pleasing stoke and energy, and kind of like, God, like naivety in a way, but the kind of naivety that you always have when you just come across something and it just sparks you and you're passionate about it. Um, and I just felt like, just to go into something like what we were trying to do with Surfline in Australia, which is basically, cross a giant cultural barrier with something that was steeped in Californian surf culture and grown out of that culture, and bring it to a place that was so powerfully enriched by its own surf culture, markedly different to that of California. Uh, this could not be achieved by someone who was still stuck somewhere in the 80s or 90s, thinking about how surfing was back then and thinking that was the only way it could be, right? Like, we needed to open our eyes to what was actually happening around us. And this was something Hannah was able to help me with straight away, really quickly. Like, as much as I was like excited by that, I had a real deep willingness to break the bonds of my own attachment to my earlier surfing life and try to feel my way forward. It's a tricky time. When you're my age, you really want to find new ways to move forward with your surfing. And I felt like one of them was just to embrace this new cadre of people who'd entered the water, people of all ages and both genders, who they didn't really know how to surf very well, but it didn't matter. They were just sort of super stoked. I never felt threatened by anyone, in that process. But I did want to understand it better. And so that was what I was thinking with Hannah, and it was like proved in spades. And I don't know, I think we went on and grew something really good for Surfline in Australia, in the process, because we connected with so many new people through that. And I guess at the same time, underneath that, there's still, the strong bonds of surfing that do, for Australians, lie back in that like 80s and 90s period. They're still alive. I'm not saying they're dead. It's just that you can't kind of ignore the surf communities and the lineups of today and pretend it was like 30 years ago. It's just not like that anymore at all.
Well, as a potential career path moving forward, you should give seminars on how to hire people, because that was a fascinating approach to that interview, and it worked out great. Like, the fact that you guys have become such real friends, is more than you could ever hope to get out of a job interview.
Yeah, totally. I mean, very different type of friendship than I've ever had in my life. I've had people like refer to it as a mentorship, and I've had other people refer to it as like a sexual relationship, which is laughable. But I think the truest representation of our friendship is just like pure fun, friendship, and just an intellectual connection that we then get to share the stoke of surfing with the rest of the world. And I guess an analysis of where the surf communities are at, like, that's something, obviously you're such an analytical mind, and we have so much data to draw down on. We've had so much data to draw down on. I think we've got an opportunity to really break down how lineups have changed and how the surf culture is constantly evolving.
For sure.
So, I think it's worth acknowledging or noting people's ages as we move through this conversation. So, Nick, are you 60?
I'm 65 years of age.
65?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, older than I thought. I thought you were 60 for some reason.
Well, I've got
Hannah,
a camera like a grommet, so it's understandable.
yeah. Hannah, are you 33?
I am 33.
Okay. So can you explain how you talk about it a little bit in the intro of your guys' podcast, but can you paint a picture of how you discovered surfing and the time that you entered, and then maybe use that to talk about lead into working in the surf space?
Yeah, so my dad's family is like, I guess you'd describe it as a classic Australian surf family. I grew up in a place called Bondi Beach, which I'm sure everybody knows, to be honest. And my dad is one of 10, and they were just like growing up in Bondi in like the 70s and just kind of running rampant in like a really free range kind of style. And my auntie was really good friends with Pauline Menser, and like kind of they'd go down to Bells together for Aussie titles, like meet Nick down there, and just they'd all just have this like crazy surf experience. So when like my generation came along, we were really thrust into the water from a pretty young age. Like uh, my aunt in particular moved up to Crescent Head, bought a surf shop, married a man named Peter Cornish, who's like another surfer, kind of surfboard shaper. Daughter Sam was on tour. So like when we were kids, it was like you go up to Crescent and everyone would just be going surfing, like being pushed. I remember my cousins pushing me into waves and just just like that. Like I don't think I really took to it as a sport. Like I was into a bunch of other sports, but we were all just really into the ocean. Um, and yeah, in terms of like progressing through life, I think something that surfing gives you when you start it really young is like a clear pathway to the nature and the ocean, and like you can always go back to that. And it's something for me that's always really just made me feel really calm and happy, just to know no matter where I am in my life, I can go to the ocean, take a surfboard, and just forget about everything that I'm doing. um Moving it into a career was like kind of a weird one. Like I don't know. I was just like most kids, kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do, and did a marine biology degree and kind of didn't quite finish it. And then went and did a journalism degree and was like, oh, super into cameras and things like that. And I was like, how does this all fit together? And there's this like little misto wedge that happens around the corner from Bondi called Mackenzie's Bay. And I bought my first water housing and started shooting this wave, and I ran into Luke Kennedy, and he was really like, "What the fuck are you doing out here, dude?" Like, I felt like he was saying like, "I've never seen a woman shooting surf." It's not what he said, but that was the tone in his voice when we had that interaction. And eventually he knew who my family were, and he was like, "Come and like do some stuff for tracks," because at the time I think they didn't really have any women riding or doing anything about the women's side of the tour. So I was just kind of like, okay, cool, I'll do this. This seems fun. And plodded away through that, and eventually somehow found myself in Indonesia just with a camera and cruising around all the resorts and shooting a bunch of average surfers and really ruining their lives by showing them their first ever surf photo when they were thinking they were Kelly Slater.
That is a brutal process to go through.
Oh, I've never seen more grown men almost cry than when I've shown them their surf photos.
Yeah, that's brutal. It's necessary though.
I feel it's very important, reality bites. But there,
Absolutely.
there you have it. Like when Hannah told me the stories of how she worked on her photography and her cinematography through, hiring out to resorts and boat charters, it really hit me just how few women have been included in the whole area of surf journalism generally. I mean, it's a theme of the entire surf industry, if you will, that women have never held the kind of strong places at the table that they've really deserved, and that the surfers, the surf cultures have really needed, right? That's only just starting to happen now. People like Jessie Miley Dyer and Brooke Farris, even though Brooke was recently left Rip Curl as CEO, she was still CEO of Rip Curl. It was pretty gnarly. But Hannah was having to find a way toward expertise in a chosen field through this new pathway, and possibly a really valuable pathway, something that maybe would have been difficult to achieve through the normal passage of, surf media, like getting hired out by big surf companies to document their brand or whatever. But instead, just really trying hard to shoot good surf photos of people who can't surf that good in epic waves. Wow, what a learning.
It's repetition. Like, you don't, like, we've spoken about this quite a lot. Like, you don't get good at anything or better at anything by like intellectualizing it and hypothesizing about how to do it. It's actually in the action that you get better at it. And when you're shooting every day and you can't really afford for anything to go wrong, you get pretty good at it.
Yeah. I was interested, your guys in your guys' podcast, there's so much, it's so packed with history. And I was interested to hear, I think it might have been the first episode where you guys were talking about how in surfing, it wasn't always male dominated, at least in Australian surfing. And maybe to Nick's point, maybe the media side of it was, or the journalism side, but it was interesting to hear about the origin of it and that it wasn't always male dominated.
Yeah, I don't think surfing itself started that way. Like, we all know the Hawaiian queens and
Yeah.
princesses for surfing, and in Australia, like, it did. If you look back at the old footage of Bondi and the old photos, like, it seems really equal, like women and men having a really great time in the surf. But yeah, obviously that changed. During the Depression?
Well, there's a lot of things, right? Like, Dave, one reason there's a bit of history in the first few episodes of the potty is that we're trying to set a scene here that we can jump off into in the future. But it's like most of us, our picture of the world and the little worlds that we inhabit are formed purely through our own experience, right? So if we grow up in a certain time, we see surfing being a certain way, then for us, that's how surfing has always been, right?
Yeah.
But like anywhere in the world, this is not the case. Surfing has flexed and changed with every possible social change. All the things that are involved in forming our lives have changed many times over the past century and a half, when surfing's really been part of, I don't know, I guess, non-Polynesian consciousness. And I don't think you can downgrade that, because things are quite cyclical and things will turn around and turn around. And like, I feel like that's kind of what we've been seeing really in the last 5 to 10 years, is a return to a true normal as far as like the gender balance in the water and stuff. This is the way that surfing has been in the past and the way it probably will be in the future. And the period between maybe like 72, 73 up till the late 90s was the aberration, right? The full-on masculine dominance of surfing was an aberration through that time, and it may not look like that at all in the future.
Yeah. I mean, talking about the cyclical nature, another story you guys told on the podcast was about the first Australian surf mag, which was just called the Surf. What year was that, by the way?
Oh, 19.
1918
I was going to say
and 1919.
Crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had that exact same thought about the cyclical nature, because that took place during a boom time, and then it went away during, a bust time, which was, I guess, the Spanish flu. But it feels like surfing goes through that periodically, where maybe it grows too big for its britches, and then it has to regress back or contract back to a core. The core can't support the boom time, and the boom people go away, and then it's always just the core who's still going to buy surfboards and buy wetsuits and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Dave. What do you reckon the core looks like?
Yeah.
What do you mean looks? Do you
Like,
mean physically?
Give me a character of, like, if you're painting a picture of a core surfer, what does that look like?
I mean, it's how they organize their time is the first thing that I would define it by. So just somebody who's driving to the beach and going surfing, I don't know, 5 days a week, 3 days a week, something like that. So organizing their family life and their work schedule to allow for that.
Okay.
That would be the main criteria. Do you want me to give a physical description too?
It doesn't have to be necessarily physical, maybe more about what kind of boards they're riding, how old do you think they might be?
Okay. Uh, from my experience, they would be between 30, maybe like 28 to like 55 or so, probably 80% male. And boards that they're riding in Southern California, specifically, a lot of pointy thrusters. It's like 75% pointy thrusters, and then 5% longboards, and the rest kind of mid length or alternative high performance shortboards. That's what it looks like for me.
Yeah, I thought that might be your answer. I think Nick and I have a little bit of insight further into what the core actually looks like. I really think your first description there is perfect. Like, anyone that goes to the beach 3 to 5 times a week centers their life around making decisions around surfing. I think they're definitely a core surfer. I think you'll find, like, maybe, for example, we have information that it might be like 38% of those kind of surfers would be riding a longboard, and 36% of those kind of surfers would be riding a performance thruster.
And they would probably overlap, right? Right.
Sure,
But
sure, sure, sure.
they might be riding mid lengths as well. They might be riding other kinds of craft in some cases, foils or whatever. But
Bodyboards, don't forget the bodyboards.
bodyboards, which you cannot ever forget in surf culture. But yeah, the types of boards people ride, what does that tell you about them? Like, say 38% of the core surfers in the world have a longboard in the quiver and ride it occasionally. Like, what does that tell you about core surfing, where it's at?
I'm not exactly sure. It depends what kind of longboard they're riding. They maybe it could be that they're nostalgic, or it could be that they're less fit than they used to be. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering that myself, but Hannah and I have spent a lot of time roaming up and down selected coasts over the last 4 or 5 years. And what we've noticed, I think it's fair to say, what we've noticed about longboard cultures in that time is that they are much more evenly gender split.
Mm.
And they're quite young as a rule.
Very committed surfers, like, definitely change their lives to go surfing.
Yeah, chuck a lot of stuff in some cases, just to go and
Yeah.
live present head or whatever, and they're remarkably skillful, and it feels to us, just from observation, it seems to us that they're not really that interested in crazy heavy slabs or the pipeline or the world's more challenging waves, that they're really interested in waves they can ride purely for pleasure with as little pain and suffering as possible.
Yeah, yeah. This this fits actually with my experience doing the podcast and kind of interacting with listeners over the years, I guess, where it does validate exactly a much more kind of open-mindedness to writing everything, but also a dismissal of the pretense that I grew up with, that I think was embedded in me through the surf magazines, where there was a hierarchy and there were 3 or 5 magazines that everything was filtered through their lens, and there was 5 brands that supported and funded all of those magazines. So there was kind of this homogeneity of the experience if you wanted to enter the space. as a surfer. Yeah, I see a lot of that pretense being gone. And I do constantly have to kind of readjust my own understanding and cater to, I mean, I really do cater podcast content to what people are asking for. They'll ask me to interview a certain person or whatever. Um, but it also bodes well for those doing the hiring, like Nick was, where an acknowledgement that you don't know everything and that what you do know is limited by your own perspective. And by the way, the clients are now limited. Like you're only going to service certain clients if you're doing everything your way. If you have a board of directors that is, you know, various colors, various socioeconomic status, various genders, then all of a sudden you're opening the aperture to the content that is being created to a broader audience ultimately. So it's not even a ethical kind of decision to make. It's just a sound business decision to make.
Well, somewhat. It's also acknowledgement that surfing doesn't exist outside the societies in which it is embedded, right? Like surfing in California is not able to be separated from California's general socioeconomic structures. It lives within it. It's not living outside it. And it's the same for surfing here in Australia. It's a creature of the societies in which it dwells, right? And that's really what, like, harking back to your thought about the core and the perimeter or whatever, right? Surfing is not doing that, right? Like if everything stayed the same in the society in which the surf culture dwelled, then it wouldn't change its face. It would just keep growing along with the population or whatever, right?
Totally.
But because things change in societies and cultures and economies, because there are ups and downs here, because there are semi-recessions and semi-booms, there's only semi nowadays, thank goodness. um, and because there's fluctuations in the value of coastal real estate, which sometimes drives populations toward the coast and sometimes drives them away and maybe cherry picks people who are able to live near coasts. Because of those and a million other factors, surfing's numbers and styles tend to fluctuate, right? But it's not a product of the surf culture, right? Not really.
Yeah. I'm curious, your interview with Hannah, and you were talking about what you were hoping to get out of that employee that you ultimately hired. Was that a missive from Surfline themselves, or was that just your own personal ambition, Nick? And if it was your own personal, did you clear it with Surfline in advance?
Yeah, fuck. No, it wasn't a Surfline idea, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
It was funny, like my boss at the time at Surfline was Dave Gilovich, and there were like 2 or 3 other people in line for Hannah's job, and one of them was a similarly smart late 20s woman who's really interested in photography and had a snappy mind, you know, maybe not as sharp as my buddies here, but pretty good. And Gilovich was just hands off with it. He just goes, "Where are you finding these incredibly smart women? What the fuck is going on?" And I don't think it ever really dawned on the Surfline crew at that point that there might be really smart women out there who could just fucking kill it for them, you know? And it wasn't like that at all. That was more me thinking, you know what, like, look at me. I'm like in a way, I'm the ultimate male avatar of those times in surfing when surfing was dominated by masculine vibe and pride and strength and, you know, aggression and like gangs kind of. And so if anyone was going to subvert that, it had to be me, right? Like I felt like nothing would have given me more stoke than to find someone like Hannah to help me do that work.
I
What
do
was
think
the
in terms of the media side of it, even now, if you look at any of those companies, there's nowhere near any women sitting in a senior role in a surf media company anymore. Like now that we don't work for them, like there's no one that does media that's in a senior female position. Maybe outside of Red Bull, like Red Bull has some representation, but no one else does.
That's super true.
It has to be like, it's like it has to be like female only for women to get a seat, and you make your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the funny things about surf media right now, Dave, in a way, is that you have to be a woman, you know, being feminine, or you have to be a man being kind of masculine, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's hard to be a human in that.
It's hard to be a human in that.
well, what's interesting is like now's the best time ever. The ground is laid waste. Like if you want to just create your own content and be in that lead position in a media company, you can design it yourself and do it yourself, you know? There are no barriers of entry anymore.
That's true. There are still barriers to finance. You know, money makes the world go round. You can't make good pieces of work, whether it be writing or video, film, or any other form of media without some kind of funding, right? So the funding has to be available to you.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, I want to get into Surfline actually. I don't know if you guys are able to or willing to share the story of what went down. And then also lead into how do we make a living in surfing right now, either as a writer or a photographer. But do you want to start with Surfline?
Oh, I don't know. I guess we had a fantastic time at Surfline. It was every bit as rewarding and fascinating as I hoped it would be at the start. Like, we got to do a lot of work. You might not have seen a lot of it, Dave, because a lot of it happened inside the Australian surfline ecosystem.
Hey, now we went to the Olympics.
But we went to the Olympics. We shot an insane documentary piece on the epochal, never to be repeated Eddie of January 23, which is yet to see the light of day. We got to learn a lot about surf populations around the world, which I just don't think that we would have been able to get hold of the type of deep dish data that exists through something like Surfline. And more to the point, I think we just got to kind of like prosecute our own vision of surfing, which is super positive, right? Like we just think surfing's fantastic. We have that childlike naivete about it, right? And it's based on our own surfing experiences, both together and separately. Surfing has never been less than incredible fun for me and for Hannah. And when we surf together, we just have this enormously fun time. It's also very serious. Like we both take surfing quite seriously, and we try to be better at it all the time. And we extremely love surfboards, and we kind of probably spend a bit too much money on them. But I don't know, Surfline gave us that opportunity to like kind of display that. Sometimes we ran into trouble because of it, because we would get excited about really great waves that were happening somewhere, and then we would write and publish stuff about that on Surfline, and that wasn't always appreciated by the people who happen to be living at those spots. They'd be like, "Oh, you're blowing up our spot," even though it was a fucking national surfing reserve and it had been surfed for 80 years, and like they didn't even know the history of the spot that they were pissed off about at all. But nonetheless, you know, that was something that was like really apparent to us, that there was still that sense of possession in surf culture around surf spots, even among people who'd started surfing in the recent times. you know, who weren't infected by the 70s and 80s and 90s. They'd only started surfing quite recently, and yet they still felt enormous ownership over surf spots. I guess that's like human nature more than anything. But we ran across that a bit, and like Novette will lead you into that occasionally in surf culture, that you'll just stumble over a shibboleth, you know.
Yeah.
We made our choices around that, hey? Like we kind of go, okay, whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of what happened there, it's kind of obvious. Like, look at the site now, you don't see any content on there really. That was a choice. And
Yeah,
it's the kind of thing, like what Nick and I do passionately is make content and make hopefully really good content.
yeah,
So if that's not being executed by any business, there's just no place for us.
yeah. So if we're working for a company and they say, oh, we're not really interested in content per se anymore, then we don't have a place there, right? So
I mean,
that's all that really happened at Surf. And we're, like I said, really happy with the time we spent there. And it felt rewarding for us. I know it was super rewarding for Surfline.
well, so as somebody who creates content, I'm interested to know, was the content you were creating just not getting clicked on? Was it not getting the attention that they felt justified the expense?
I don't think that was it. No, I don't
No.
think it was about traction, because the traction was strong. I think it was more about priorities. Like Surfline fundamentally is a surf forecasting app. And over the last 40 odd years, they've used a content to product model to market that forecasting app. But maybe it's grown to a point where they don't need that. Or it's, maybe there's enough brand recognition globally that you can just start marketing the product. I don't know the answer to why those decisions have been made, but it's just a change,
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine it's a very visible change to you and to anyone else who's, watching either the site or surf media generally.
Yeah, totally. Well, I don't think they know the answer to that question either yet. They're obviously experimenting with that, and they'll find out whether or not they can survive without the content aspect, but we'll see.
You tend to find things out, right? Like
Yeah.
the audience tells you, right? The audience rules. That's one thing I was really reminded of at Surfline, is that I really, really strongly believe in audiences paying for what you do. I just don't think there's any way around that. At some point, the audience has to tell you whether you're doing a good enough job that they're willing to pay for what you're providing them, and holy crap, I treated those, especially the Australian subscription base, as like almost a, I don't know, not holy writ, but if we hit a subscription goal, which I had in my mind, it wasn't really in Surfline's mind, but I had a goal in my mind, and we did hit that and we exceeded it. Then I felt like, well, that's the justification. That's telling us we're doing well.
I feel like it was almost like Nick really taught me this about content in general. It's like a partnership with the audience, and like you can watch them move and flex with like the data of what you put out, but it's more about just going surfing and asking people questions and feeling if they truly resonate to an idea that you might have.
Yeah. And if you can help them in some way.
I'm going to come back to how we make a living now in surfing, but before we do, about you talking about blowing up waves and people getting upset even though they have no understanding of the history of the wave. Do you know who Glenn Hening is?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I interviewed Glenn Hening a while ago, or a month ago. I haven't published it yet, but he was a founder of Surfrider Foundation. And he said that they set out with two goals. The first goal was to help prevent people from getting sick from the ocean. Obvious, that's still part of their mission. Goal number two, to prevent surfers from getting sick of one another. Because he had grown up in a time where if you were driving down Pacific Coast Highway and you saw somebody else with a surfboard on the car, you waved. You're like, what's up? Where are you going? Can I go? Can we do this together? And he saw it transition into a time where everybody just started being rude to one another and were just kind of gatekeepers, and localism started and all that stuff. And so he wanted to, uh, revert things back to the way that it was when he was young.
Right. Tricky one, that one.
I mean, it's tricky. It's tricky for me because I understand exactly the ideology, but I can't help but deny when I paddle out, I'm not trying to make friends out there, I would like to. I mean, that would be a better version of myself. I'd probably enjoy the thing more, but there is something just embedded in it where even though the resource keeps coming, it feels like a finite resource.
Well, it's finite in time, isn't it? There's only so many set waves in a surf.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess it also depends what you want to get out of your surfing.
Yeah.
Like if you're out there, like I see this at my local beach a lot. I see people who are out there for the social aspect of it, to go and sit there, have a chat, go for a surf, catch a couple waves, and like really form their friendships like that. But then like I don't necessarily surf like that. Like I'm a bit like, I just want to catch my waves and have a good time on them. But yeah, I think it just depends what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like you, Dave, for sure. I paddle out and I'm like, okay, what do I want? I'm first. I'm the first person. But I'm also super curious about everyone else in the lineup around me. And like I said earlier, like I'm not really kind of threatened by the surfers. Like I don't take up a kind of defensive posture in the lineup. I know I'm going to get the waves that I want, basically.
Yeah.
So I kind of relax into that a bit, and that gives me time to have a look around and be curious about who else is out there, and wonder what they're doing out there, what they're thinking about the surfing. And this makes surfing a lot more fun for me, to be honest. Like,
Totally agree. I mean, the least enjoyable years of my surfing were when I was trying my hardest to get better at it, which was probably when I was 20 to 30, And I would leave the water. If I hadn't progressed from the last session, I'd leave the water upset.
wow. How did you try to progress, Dave? What were you doing?
I mean, literally, like, who's the pro out? Oh, he did an air. I'm going to try to do an air now, or something like that. It was it was strictly about ripping, which is what I like about Hannah's little in the intro of your guys' podcast, where she's like, I was never obsessed with ripping. I think it's something to that degree. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's so foreign to me. Or it's foreign to the way that I entered surfing. It's not foreign to me now because my surfing life is very different for the last decade or so. But it was all about that for 20 years, to my own detriment. Like I recognized my surfing didn't progress and I was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess something that you need to recognize, or like most surfers at any level should recognize, is that you have to be like the top 1.11% to ever be a professional surfer, and that's the only place that ripping matters. So like, why don't you just take it for what it is, which is a hobby, and you should have fun with your hobbies.
Totally.
Yeah.
Completely. Well, moving on or back to how do you guys, so as a photographer and a writer, Nick, are you a writer? What's your official job title?
Wow.
Writer, director, old man.
Old man. I don't
How does one make a living in the surf space nowadays?
Fuck. This is a good question, and one that where we haven't answered in this new phase of ours right now, because we're still so young. I hate to be cliched about it. I do think that it, like what Hannah was talking about, having fun in the surf, right, needs to translate into what you do for work as well. otherwise you just wouldn't stand it, right? Like you couldn't do it if you weren't enjoying it in some way. But how to make a solid living out of that, like I think there's numerous ways, like more ways than there's ever been before uh, in modern surfing history. Like, you know, like again, this is how surfing's tied into society. Like when that modern surfing thing started in the early 60s or whatever, like there was like probably 5 jobs.
Yeah.
There was like working in a surfboard factory, there was working in a surf shop. Shit, that's about it, really. Yeah, totally. And now there's like 7,000 jobs in surfing. And what we've decided to do, like start a little production company, start developing our own projects and engaging with people who are willing to pay us to do them is just one, right? And to make that happen, I think you probably just need to work really hard, have good ideas, and have the skills and be willing to like bring people in around you who also have the skills. And it can take a while. You've got to be patient with this stuff, I think. But I know what we're doing. We're just sort of working slowly and patiently toward a breakthrough project type of thing. And once you get that, then you're off and running, really.
I do think like surfing now, in terms of money, like making money out of it, it's all about quality. Like if you're making good shit, whether it be content, whether it be clothing, whether it be sunscreen, whatever, people really value that quality right now. Like you see it with Florence, like it's a great example. Like the uptick in that is just pure product quality. And I guess that's something that Nick and I really strive for in the content that we make. Like Surfline was a great kind of learning tool, but for us it's always fast media, and that's just the pace of what that site demanded of us. Whereas what we really enjoy making is like high quality content that takes a little, it's obviously really story driven with someone like Nick involved, and it's really visual with someone like me involved, like beautiful visuals. So like I think that's the exciting thing about where we're at right now, is like we actually have the time to take a breath and make really high quality shit. And I feel like that's where surfing is right now. Like that's what it wants.
Yeah, high quality and something that's grown out of the surf cultures, right? Like, it's noticeable. Hannah mentioned Florence, right? It's such a strong presence in the supposed surf industry right now, and it's really clear why. It's just grown straight out of the surf experience itself. Like, there's frills on what Florence does, but they're good frills. you know, they're not. There's no nonsense in that
It's almost
product
like
line.
it's a bit like Need Essentials. Like you strip away all the branding and make a really good product. People will buy it.
That's right. And a little bit like, it can be the same for us too, I think.
Are you soliciting business outside of the surf industry at all?
Yes, we certainly will be looking outside the surf industry.
Yeah, for sure. Looking outside the surf industry. Yeah.
I mean, it's something I think about all the time. Is it's almost better to not make a living in the surf industry and just do it so that you can just do it motivated by the initial conceit and not necessarily by trying to pay the mortgage,
I think there's just like so many touch points to surfing in surf adjacent media specifically. Like
Totally.
tourism, it's touched by surfing. Like there's so many different touch points that our skill sets are applicable. And it doesn't mean it's not surfing, but it's more like the modern picture of surfing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, the tagline for We Shouldn't Be Friends is Tales from a World Where Everyone Surfs. And in a world where everyone surfs, everybody is interested in that world, right? Like it's not, it's not any longer Only a surfer knows the feeling. That's not the world that we live in anymore. Lots of people know that feeling and they feel close to it and they'd like to be involved with it in some way. And lots of people surf and they don't make a lot of noise about it, but they go surfing and they love it. Like, it's crazy how many fascinating people you run into in surf zones. Like, think about the people we run into and like, holy shit.
I think about the people that we run into, and then in Australia we have this fucking awesome resource called Ozplay, which is data about all the different sports. So you can look at Ozplay from wherever you are in the world and see the breakdown of people who are surfing. And it's just mind-boggling how many people are surfing and like who they are. It's I'm so fascinated by that always.
Can you give the origin story or why start a podcast?
When we finished up at Surfline, I think while we were at Surfline, the idea of a podcast had been thrown around a lot from a lot of different people, and we'd kind of like mucked around with maybe Nick and Tom doing one or like something of that nature anyway. And then as soon as we kind of got that call, I messaged Nick straight away and I was like, we have to do a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that oddness of our friendship, you know, that really, you know, it couldn't really have happened at another time in surfing. You know, that we're in the same room at the same time, that we're willing to accept each other and not just accept each other, but make a close friendship and be able to share surf stoke between us, but also be kind of sharp with each other. It just felt like it was a touchstone. Like, we just kind of, I don't know, really wanted to work with that a little bit in public in some way.
Well, give my listeners the sales pitch. What is the concept for the podcast and why should they listen?
You know, first of all, I guess the concept is it's a conversation between two people who should never have met through surfing, right? And we're just so different and yet we're fucking exactly the same, right? Like, we, you know, look at each other's surfboards and basically copy each other's surfboards. Like, you know, there's like, I don't know if it's mentory, but like I've had lots of really great waves in my life, and like I can see Hannah's like a great surfer, and she's just sort of on the upswing still. You know, there's a long arc. Like, really good surfing comes over time, not necessarily in a rush. And so it's super cool to be able to kind of walk through that and walk alongside her in that. And we're definitely going to introduce that into the potty at some point, like the learning processes of surfing, the things that are worth your time and attention and improvement, and the things that really aren't worth bothering about too much.
Yeah, we'll never encourage you to watch a pro do an air and think you can do the same.
No.
Good. Good.
We'll never tell you how to hold your hands in a cutback. Okay, promise you. Promise you'll never do that. And also, but
I know, I'm like, we should tell people how to.
Yeah, we probably should talk that one through at some point. But so there's that, but it's mostly just the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have an endless conversation ahead of us, me and Han.
Well, you'll die
at some point. It's fairly long my life. It's funny, huh? Like, one thing that, like, if you want to judge like a really core surfer, right? It's how they talk about how they want to surf when they're 90. Right? Like, they have a picture of themselves surfing when you really shouldn't surf. It's funny, almost like I was looking through a sheet of interviews I've done with Kelly over the years, and almost every freaking single one of them, he mentions how he's going to be surfing when he's 90, right?
Really?
And like for a while it was like backdoor, but now it's kind of gone back to Kira, right? And who knows where it'll eventually reside, but he's thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
And it's definitely top of my mind. Like, how do you grow old beautifully as a surfer? But like, I don't mean as a surfer in people's eyes, but actually your own surfing. Like, what's the bottom turn going to look like when I'm 85? I really don't know.
It's funny when you say that, like I think about that as well, but I think I kind of think about it like the granny grommets or like that 92-year-old Nancy, was it, who in New Zealand who rode the foamy. I can really resonate with those stories and thinking of myself when I'm 90 and maybe standing up on a board rather than on a boogie board or something, but I don't think it matters what really the craft is as long as you're out there and being able to still do it.
Yeah.
And still having a lot of fun. Like Nancy seemed to like be having a hell of a good time at night.
Totally.
Like,
What, Nick, I ask this question of everybody basically, so don't feel put on the spot. But what are you doing at age 65 to physically or dietary wise to maintain your surfing life?
Don't ask him about his diet. We're gonna.
He's so fit.
I know.
Is it just genetics?
I feel the more food you eat, the better off you are, basically.
Man,
I'm not
I know that's not true for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. I know. Like I do a lot of swimming. A heap of swimming. I try to swim at good paces. Like a thing that I do, like outside the direct, what we think of as the surf culture, is that I coach a really hotshot surf racing squad down here at Newport. It's a whole sport that exists in Australia and to some degree in the US through the lifeguards and stuff, and in some other countries, but it's developed out of lifesaving and lifeguarding culture, where you race through surf zones, both swimming and on certain kind of craft paddleboards and shit like that. Okay, so I work with my hotshot squad down here at Newport is pretty much the best there is, and they fully keep me on my toes, right? Like if I'm going to successfully coach them, then I need to understand what they're trying to do, and that means I really have to kind of go with them at times, like do paddleboard races with them, do surf swims with them, do a lot of pool work, things like that, and that bounces off surfing really well because it's fundamentally trying to go really fast through a surf zone in a way that you don't do when you're just surfing, right? Like most of the time when you're surfing, you're exploiting loopholes in lineups. You're trying to lessen the workload, trying to find the easy way through situations. In this kind of surf racing, you're trying to do that, but at maximum speed that you can achieve. And sometimes there's no easy way, and you just got to go through it. That stuff is like invaluable for someone of my age, and it builds on many years of focusing on trying to stay fit and stuff and trying to stay in tune because I got my eyes on 90, right? Like, and I can't get there if I'm less than, right? Like I think like me and Han interviewed Jerry about 2 years ago, and Jerry has always been such a I don't know, he's such a fucking guru, and like in some ways it's kind of an act, but at the same time he really is a guru, and like he's always been about longevity, right? Even back in the day when all his peers were just basically, living fast and dying young in some cases, right? He was always doing sit-ups and stuff like that. He was always working toward longevity, and he's done that with his yoga and
the little wheel thing
and the gut wheel, right? Like pushing out.
Yeah.
Try and do that one time. Try and do like 2 of them. He can like do 200. And so like that he's found his own way toward longevity. We all can do that. And like for me, my way toward it is through that surf zone, trying to go fast, trying to be super efficient, you know, being as good of a swimmer as I can, and just translating that into surfing. So I can surf for like 3 hours and it doesn't hurt.
Amazing. What surf media do you both follow nowadays?
Cool.
Cool.
Okay, no, I pay for Stab, but I pay for it because I'm deeply interested in what they're reporting on, and probably from a really critical eye.
I'm kind of a fan of Flick and Loz's podcast.
Yeah.
Oh,
Little City
stop
Calm
it!
too. And because it's just so like what? um we're working with Surfing World. That's one of the pillars on which we're building right now. I think Surfing World is probably the coolest surf mag in the world right now, bar none. Partly that's because it's flown under the radar while producing the kind of super quality stuff that we both really like to see. So I'm kind of a fan of Surfing World, but I've always kind of been a fan of Sean's anyway. So like, you know, Doherty's a classic. But I'm kind of a fan of anything that's interesting and like that can come from anywhere. I'm not typically a fan of people who are trying to overtly market themselves while pretending they're not with content. I see a bit of that, well, a lot of that these days. It's probably bleeding out of the Instagram habit, right?
Totally.
But I won't name names there. What's the point? Like that stuff tends to die on the vine over time. But mostly what I do is I look forward to someone doing something really awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be us.
Yeah, probably us. But like I always have that expectation. I think like surf culture is like there's so many things you could do. There's so many people. Oh, here's something else, right? I do not trust people who call themselves storytellers. I'm sorry. If you're calling yourself a storyteller, you're not a storyteller.
That's good advice.
Actually just sort of the funniest thing that we both thoroughly enjoyed in surf media over the last year, and that's Jalesa Vincent's musical.
Fuck
that
yeah.
thing was fucking sick.
Oh my God.
Yeah, completely.
Anything that woman does is worth watching.
Yeah.
So funny, man.
Yeah. Anyway, like anyone at any time can do something insane. I look forward to seeing it when it happens.
Who's surfing? Are you excited by at the moment?
Oh, I'm a sucker for style, hey. So my tops never really change, but like Ethan, Steph, Katie now, like anyone, Mikey February, anyone that's got a style, I'm just like goo goo gaga over.
I like all that. I like people who surf beautifully and brilliantly and express their stoke in it. Like Geordie winning in El Salvador was such a stoker for me. Like just watching on and just thinking, look at him, the big lug, you know, like he's been chucking buckets for like 20 something years now. And he's still surfing as good as he ever has, and he's still super worth watching. Like it's hard not to watch when Geordie's riding a wave. And he was so happy to win. Like there was nothing bunged on about that. There was nothing like, you know, getting chaired up the beach with and someone running over and putting a sponsor's cap on and him saying all the right things or whatever, you know. It was full on joy. Holy crap, who else? I don't know. Like we're both pretty predictable in this way, I think. Like you can't get away from John. you can't get away from Gabriel, I don't think.
Oh yeah, watching Gabby at the Olympics, actually,
Yeah.
that was mind melting.
Yeah.
Like, you see the videos and stuff, but being in the channel, watching him ride that wave that should have been a 10 or whatever it was, like how that wave was breaking that day, like he's amazing.
Yeah. Fully.
Yeah.
Super athlete.
Well, final question for everybody is just whose boards are you guys riding?
Oh, both of us, sadly, have a really great quiver of Rodney Dahlberg surfboards, who by far is the best board shaper in the world, but you've just got to get him to make you a surfboard. So if you can convince Rodney to get you a quiver of boards, they're the best ones.
Yeah, especially the 6 channels. I don't know. What have I got in my quiver? I've got that. I've got a Greg Weber full single concave, like one made off one that he made for Trent Munro about 1.5 years ago. And both Hannah and I saw it and went, oh yeah. And Hannah had never had a Weber. And like Greg's funny because he shapes all these wild, crazy boards. It looks like no one can ride. But then when he just makes a normal surfboard, clean, pristine, all the curves in the right place, it's just like one of the best boards you'll ever have.
Wow.
It's like that thing's like a really fast twin, but with all the hold of a thruster, because it's a thruster, and it's just like a beautiful small wave board. You can do anything on it.
Yeah, it's fucked up. I don't know. We both have boards off Chris Christensen. I've got like a fucking superb 9.8 gun, which has a name. Not many of my surfboards have a name, but that one's called Little Sister because it was made using a Twiggy template from that board that he rode that fucked up wave at Jaws on in that one heat event about 7 or 8 years ago. Do you remember that wave where he just took off? I don't know how he did that. It was like a 60-foot wave. He somehow got the rail in and pulled in.
Yeah.
Well, my board's like a little sister of that board, and it's beautiful. But we both have little Christensens as well, like little round pin CCs, and they're like semi-unforgiving boards, but like when they're in powerful situations on waves, there's nothing cleaner and better, I think.
I've got an amazing board from Gunter Rohn, Shape for Sunset, that I took on my first trip to Hawaii with Nick, and wow, that thing was like, it made me so comfortable in waves that I was so uncomfortable in, like chunky sunset, and I was just like shitting my pants, and then the board gave me all of the courage to take the wave, and just, I don't know, it's just like riding a shortboard, even though it's 7.0, you know, it's fucking amazing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys are riding shorter boards mainly, no long boards.
Oh, we have a longboard. We
do.
share a longboard. I have a mid-length that I ride. I actually say to Nick all the time, my mid-length saved my surfing, which is like a 7.2 Bonza. It's actually a dog of a board. It's a piece of shit. But if you can do anything on your mid-length, you can then do it on any other board. So to me, living in a place where the waves are average, like I get the most joy out of that surfboard for sure.
Yeah. You got to pick your boards for the waves. Like, what do you want to ride? Like, get boards for that. That's probably why I've got a bunch of like 6.1 5s, like pintails mostly, like 6 channels, a lot of them. Plus, I got like a quiver of these things, like Alan Burns 6, like hand shape from back in the day.
That thing's insane.
Oh, he let me ride one at Makaha when we were there, and I just couldn't. I was like, "Why is it going so fast? Why is my back foot like in the air?" It's just like kicking you up all the way.
Yeah,
I mean, it's also just so little foam. I mean, it's so foiled and knifey that I can't even imagine riding them anymore.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like I talked down that time in surfing, like the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all that stuff. But there's so much rich and beautiful that came out of that time too, right? And those boards are part of that time, really. Like they came out of that time and they're still here. Like that's why that thing's up on the wall. Really, it's just to remind me of like the beautiful shit that's happened over so many years in surfing.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, glad to see what you guys are up to. I think you're making meaningful contributions, and I loved to see the Surfline stuff too. I'm sad to see that stuff gone, but hopefully you're on to bigger and better, less fettered projects.
Thanks, Dave, and we will welcome you onto our podcast one of these days soon.
Yeah, watch out, Dave.
Yeah, maybe get Chaz as well.
Anytime you want. I'm sure he'd be down for sure.
Yeah.
That'd be really fun.
We want to hose him down, dude.
Yeah, do it. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David.
All right. See ya.
Surf Splendor.